Well, what do you know? I am something of a gambler myself. Welcome to the CM Kozeman channel, everyone. This is the second episode, part of a 2-episode series, where I review a strange, obscure, and sometimes bizarre set of paleo-themed trading cards which my family got me as gifts from France in the early 1990s. That's more than 30 years ago. Goddamn, how time flies. Well, there's a part 1 of this video, but you can watch them in any turn you like. In this series, we're going to be looking at this nameless other set of cards. They have this really neat red scholastic background pattern to them, full of books, tomes, and scrolls. The first card actually explains us the rules and the name of the game. Animaux de la préhistoire, which means animals of prehistory. And roughly speaking, there are these teams in this game, teams of different 4 cards each. We're gonna see them all. And your objective to win is to assemble as many cards from each team as you can. Basically a bit like poker or other card games. But guys, to tell the truth, I, for the life of me, can't wrap my mind around this card game shit. So suffice it to say that you try to collect different sets of cards, much like normal cards, I guess, and fold them and win. I don't know, it's a bit like Dinosaur poker. But I've owned this set of cards for over 30 years. And for 10 years I actively show these around to my friends, I actively utilize them, and never once did I actually play with them in this stupid manner they outlined. I just like to gawk at them, look at them, examine the creatures and the hazy background worlds in the images, and I think that was far more fun than any made-out sabak-ass kind of game. And that's the way we're gonna examine these cards today. Team by team, we're gonna look at the images, the creatures they depict, the intricacies and subtle details of their artwork, and just a general tangential commentary overall. Now, before beginning, I have to put food on the table too, so it would be highly appreciated if you can fold your cards, felt them, and donate to me on patreon.com. If you are a Patreon donor, you get to see a world of content that nobody else gets to see. There are all sorts of dinosaur pictures, commissioned art, other surreal paintings, and even resource drops. For example, I use a macro on Audacity which I wrote myself, and that's why these podcasts all sound so smooth, so in there, so present, so deep, so vivid, so in your ear. So that's one benefit. Just $1 a month really makes a world of difference for me. And for the more generous among you, I have also created the $3 tier, which is just the same as the $1 tier. But if you like what I've been doing on this channel, which is entirely run with your contributions, mind you, maybe you feel a little bit more generous, so you can donate $3 a month instead of $1 a month. And if there are any generous souls among you, I am also thankful to them. All donors on Patreon get a call out at the end of these big, meticulously edited videos, and all donors on Patreon throughout the lifetime get a shout out in my books. Oh yeah, by the way, the panhandling isn't over. All Tomorrows is now properly out as a book, and you can also order that from Amazon.com and any and all other online retailers. Just be careful to use the ISBN number that I mention here because as you may or may not know, All Tomorrows had a previous publisher which unfortunately collapsed, hurting me and many other authors, not to mention everybody who pledged their money, and be careful not to fall for their defunct item. Anyways, all the preamble is out of the way. Let's go with the cards. Let's go. Collection number 1, Le Dinosaur Carnivorous. So the card game is organized into a number of collections, each containing 4 animals, and this is our first collection, Carnivorous dinosaurs. Here we see Psilophysis, and right from the beginning it's clear to see that the artist who did this set of cards is way more competent than the artist who did the cards on the previous episode. Go watch it. The volumes, the colors, the overall motion and balance of the animal are all very expertly done. Another nice thing about this whole set is the way the artist manages successfully to install dinosaurs, which are more or less horizontal creatures, into the vertical format of the card. I really like this Psilophysis. The mustard color really works well, and if you look at its neck, it seems to have this sort of puffed up air sacs surrounding its neck, which in the fossils was much more narrow. Another detail that will be with us throughout this whole series is the paucity of the figures in the background. You see some mountains and some shambling, maybe man in a costume, prosauropod type dinosaurs, as well as some long-necked dinosaurs which don't really belong in the same time as Psilophysis, but stay used to these because you're gonna see way more in upcoming cards. Next up, quite a surprise, this is Spinosaurus, the ever-changing sail-backed theropod. As you know, the image of this dinosaur routinely changes every 3 months or so as more fossil discoveries are announced and shit. But this one really exemplifies the 1980s/1990s understanding of Spinosaurus in a really strange way. Credit where credit is due, Spinosaurus really was seen as a sail-backed regular carnosaur in that era, so in that respect, at least, there's not much wrong with this reconstruction, but the artist, in trying to fit Spinosaurus to a vertical format, changed it into something almost like a heraldic creature. It stands upright, almost like a human being. One of the legs protrudes from a really bizarre angle, and it's got a flat foot like a human being too. The other leg is bizarrely butt-like, but it's also walking on its toes. The hips weirdly don't connect to the tail, but the tail seems like a flabby extension of the sail, and the hands with 4 digits are fat, almost like the toe pads of a gecko. And up above the head is the weirdest part. It articulates with the body in an almost human-like manner. The eye is weirdly lidded, suggestive of some sort of intelligence, and the thing even has a forehead. So yeah, make of this what you will. You know, there's a natural history of these images, and there's also now a cultural and artistic history of them too. And this particular Spinosaurus image is almost certainly plagiarized, or, well, let's be lenient, let's say it's been copied from this particular 1960s or 70s image. You can see where the quote-unquote influence comes from. Details of the face and the weird splayed legs are all very similar. This is one of the most bizarre reconstructions of Spinosaurus, already a bizarre creature. And I don't know about you, but in my heart of hearts, I have a soft spot for this retro Carnosaurian type version of Spinosaurus. I wish something like that was really real, and who knows, I mean, the fossil record is very patchy. Remember, if there were 100 prehistoric species, we maybe have fossils of only one. That's how patchy it is. So maybe, even possibly, something like the Retrospinosaurus may have lived in the past. Anyways, let's move on. Oh my god, we have a bruiser here. Look at this Allosaurus. The legs are the only faintly accurate thing in this picture, and the rest is all just lovely speculation. I mean, just look at how thick the body is. It's almost like a cross between a monitor lizard and a micro bully. And the arms are very stocky and they have these like stubby fingers. The tail is very, very long, almost twice the body length of the animal, and curls behind like a Ray Harryhausen serpent. The hips, weirdly enough, are very narrow, and the rear legs are very closely spaced together, to such a degree that there seems to be no flesh between the legs. And yeah, don't even get me started about the lush red goo that the Allosaur is feeding on. Look at his fucking face. That guy is diabolical, that is for sure. And yeah, we can clearly see now the artist, while talented, has some deficiencies, let's say, in the anatomy department. But yeah, their use of color and shading is really nice. But this person could really use some extra lessons about dinosaur anatomy. And finally, we have Deinonychus. And here we can see that this guy, this artist, is really playing fast and loose with anatomy. Once again, the colors are lovely. I don't know what that red bit in the background is. Is it another part of these mushy red goo that all the predatory dinosaurs seem to eat in this universe? Or is it just red water? Who knows? Deinonychus' body is flabby and soft like a green gland or a veiny testicle. Its legs are pumped up and dynamic, but the claws are all wrong. They look like glowing golden bananas and they erupt from the wrong sides of the foot. Actually, if you look closely, you'll see that the foot and hand anatomy of this drawing is one sorry mess. But you kind of overlook that because the artist, once again, is really, really good with colors. I just love the chunky dark brown outlines, the yellow, green, subtle blue sky, and the body of the animal, orange grading into green and slightly yellow. These are just delicious colors, and they make you overlook all the disastrous errors with the anatomy. Collection 2, Le Dinosaur Herbivorous, the plant-eating dinosaurs. These are all the usual suspects you see in the background grazing on plants, and we start them off with Plateosaurus, the famous long-necked, heavy-bodied prosauropod from the lineage leading to the giant sauropods like Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus. Plateosaurus here seems to be influenced severely by this painting by John Sibbick from the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Dinosaurs, another vintage 1980s book. It seems to be carefully stepping, maybe trying not to raise a sound, as if it's going to the kitchen to steal some cookies or some shit. The expression and the posture are really funny, but once again you overlook them because the painter really knows his way with colors. Another neat small detail here is the way the painter cropped out the upper left corner of the background. Seems that he was working with a brief and he knew there was going to be some sort of text there. As for Plateosaurus itself, a few years after these cards were published, Plateosaurus got a sort of popular image makeover, and it was interpreted as a quadrupedal or a semi-quadrupedal dinosaur. And funnily enough, it has come full circle because in the present day, in 2025, our interpretation of Plateosaurus is bipedal again, but this time it is slung horizontally, much like a larger, fatter version of Silophysis, and not like an upright, long-necked, nearly humanoid creature shuffling to an unknown song in the distant past. Okay, next up we have Stegosaurus, another very popular and famous dinosaur. Not much to say about this, but in trying to make it fit to the vertical format, the artist really extended Stegosaurus' neck, which actually made it more accurate now that we know. Long story short, Stegosaurus was portrayed with a shorter neck for decades, and now with more fossil discoveries of related species, we actually know that Stegosaurus had a longer neck compared to the old reconstructions you all know and love. Next up we have Iguanodon. Now I think even the newcomers among you can recognize this as a copy of the famous Zdeněk Burian painting. Now look closely to Burian's original. You will notice that the hind leg that's in the background is obscured in the shadows. It's all dark and black. Well, the artist here tried to bring it out more, and in trying to do so, revealed his staggering ignorance of dinosaur foot anatomy. It looks like a foot that's been run over by a truck. It looks broken, bent, and all the toes are weirdly the same length, and it should be awful, but it actually looks strangely bizarre and quasi two-dimensional, and well, it is its own work of art. Let's just leave it at that. And finally, we have Anatosaurus. This time it's a copy, I think, from Charles R. Knight, the other American great master of paleoart in the past century. The face here looks like, oh my god, I mean, you wouldn't want to leave your children alone with this dinosaur, let me say that much. In the Charles R. Knight original, the tail was extending to the right, but to accommodate the card format, the artist, I think, bent it the other way, and now it looks like the dinosaur is sitting on its own tail. The arms also look strange. One arm looks like almost like a human's arm, and the other looks like a broken arm after a horrible farming accident. And if you look at the face back again, you will see that I, in my childhood, remember this card set was gifted to me in, I think, 1990 or something. I mean, the Soviet Union still existed. I am that old, everybody. And when I was a kid, I was really captivated by these cards, and I spent hours and days looking at just them. Remember, we were no iPad babies or even computer children, or even television children. So the access we had to visual media was extremely limited. So I ended up poring over every detail of the creature and the background, and it was just burnt into my brain. And I remember looking at another book later on and seeing another reconstruction of Anatosaurus, this time with little spikes or fringes on its back, and I must have been convinced that that was the right way to go, because if you look closely, you will notice that I quote-unquote corrected the illustration with some pencil lines. Yes, I was always a stickler for accuracy. Alright, so the marine paintings are among the most vivid, vibrant, and beautiful, technically speaking, of all the paintings in these series. Sadly to say, the accuracy of the creatures does not compare, but as works of pure painting, they're really beautiful, and you can really see it with this mosasaur, the Mosasaurus. It looks like a weird marine crocodile with 4 rows of spikes down its back. Now, this was an often repeating trope in vintage paleo art, by the way. You had the Mosasaurus, which was oftentimes actually smooth, but then you had this other Mosasaurus called the Tylosaur, and Tylosaurus always had a row of spikes or this weird frilly membrane running down its back, and this was a trope basically. I don't know how it originated, maybe from an old vintage Charles R. Knight painting, but yeah, I would not be one to know. And you see that trope here, taken to an extreme. Now, Mosasaurus almost looks like Sobek, the crocodile god, because the face also is like directly copy-pasted from a crocodile-like thing, and yeah, it's not accurate. But just look at the way the sea is rendered. It's glowing yellow from within. There are bubbles all around the creature, the framing, the hues, they're all so beautiful. You could bottle this thing up and drink it and it would taste like salty seawater. Next up we have the smooth sea monster, Leopleron the Paleosaur, which was around 12 meters long, and this is a slightly more accurate... No, it's not. Its fins are the most bizarre fins I've ever seen in fictional art, let us say that much. They have a sort of shoulder-like articulation, and from the shoulder, almost like a forearm, emerges this paddle. You see the same pattern repeated in the leg. There's almost like a fleshy thigh, and below that there's the fin. I know no creature that looks like this, alive, dead, or even fictional. And the head is also way too small for a pliosaur, especially for Leopleron. If you study the actual fossils of this group, you will find that they have some of the largest heads in almost all marine reptiles. And extra points for the awkwardly rendered snake-like plesiosaur in the background. It almost looks like an eyewitness drawing of a lake monster. But once again, the colors are so lovely, the sort of bluish turquoise cyan in the upper corners, the raw radium green toned with bright yellow in the creature's body, and the olive murk of the depths. They're just... you just want to eat them. And then we have Plesiosaurus. This looks like a friendly chap. It's waving at another friend in the distance, which is just a weird tail, it seems. And once again, the seas are green and the skies are yellow. Such a surreal scene. The animals in the background are really strange. There's a lot of birds, but because they all have the same wing angle and the same bullshit abstraction, they look like a bunch of flying snakes. And the fish in the background, well, some look like really prehistoric, like Devonian fish. Others are just blobs. They may or may not even be fish. Some look like loons or even water birds. And yeah, this is just a silly, whimsical creature. And finally, we have the Ichthyosaur, the Ichthyosaurus. This image is very accurate compared to the rest of this set. But the artist clearly had some problems making it fit to the vertical format. It dives into the painting at a diagonal angle, and as a result there's just a lot of needless wasted empty space on the lower right corner. But once again, the colors are beautiful, the dynamism is terrific, everything is in motion in this piece. There's even another ichthyosaur just flying in the background, and I just love it. And that is that for the C section, everybody. Let's all get out of the water. From the sea we go out to the sky and find ourselves face to face with reptile volant et oiseaux, which means flying reptiles and birds. And our first flying card is of course Archaeopteryx, the famous dinosaur bird. In a lot of vintage 1980s, 1990s paleo media, Archaeopteryx was the only dinosaur decked out with feathers. It was the quintessential bird that had something wrong with it, and like here it was illustrated, in most cases actually, with this strange blue-green plumage. Now, of course, we know that Archaeopteryx was a member of the Paravian theropod dinosaur group, which also included things like anchiornithids, dromaeosaurids with the famous velociraptor and all those, scansoriopterygids, maybe the famous and weird bat-winged dinosaurs, troodonts, the delicate, dainty, sickle-clawed predators, unenlagiids, also maybe these are the more long-faced and short-armed relatives of maybe the raptor dinosaurs, and a bunch of other things. Long story short, this thing is not a freak bird, it's a proper dinosaur, true and true. And also recently there was a kind of study which concluded that maybe Archaeopteryx may have had black coloration, so it could have looked more like a crow and not like a green flappy lizard bird. Then there's quite a big leap from Archaeopteryx to Diatryma, which lived in the Eocene. So from a creature that lived 150 millions of years ago, we jump to a ground-dwelling Eocene bird that lived 20 million years ago, quite recently in the age of mammals. And yeah, I don't know why this leap was made, but Diatryma was a popular trope. If you remember our earlier episode, that set also had a Diatryma card, and I think both illustrations may have been plagiarized or inspired by the same Zdeněk Burian painting, so that's a dubious achievement. And this card has one major incredible flaw. If you look at the background, there's a nondescript pterosaur flapping about in the background with a small head and unusually straight wings. Not to be that guy, but yeah, when Diatryma was alive, no pterosaurs were left on the earth. Also bonus points for the obstruction in this bird's legs. It looks like that area was painted and painted over again, because if you look at the background, there's also something weird and like chunky going on there too. Looks like the artist really struggled with the legs, and as a result they look like, well, legs of bronze or some sort of weird arm or shit. Let's move on to our first genuine pterosaur, Pteranodon. Now it's a pretty boring, brown, staple, predictable pterosaur illustration. I don't know what else I can say about this. One glaring error is the way the arms are drawn, stretched fully out straight. If you study the pterosaur anatomy for real, you would notice that the elbows are actually bent in a V shape, and the majority of the wing is made up of a very elongated hand bone and some very elongated finger bones, but I don't think this guy gives a fuck. Unusually though, it has the weird tail correct. If you notice in the picture, the tail looks like a little chopstick anchored to a cleft in the membrane, and many casual paleo fans don't know this, but Pteranodon actually had a bizarre ending to its tail. Its tailbone ended with something that looked like double bony prongs, much like chopsticks, extending outwards, and nobody's really certain what these did or what they were used for. I myself, in fact, fantasized about them supporting some sort of bushy or pseudo feather-like tail. It was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek speculation, but stranger things have happened in the past. Most contemporary reconstructions interpret these weird tailbones as anchors for membranes, which are not quite different from the otherwise crappy depiction you see here. Also, with both of these French paleo cards, I think the artists had this hatred for Pteranodon, because in both sets, Pteranodon is the most boring, vanilla, brown, shit-hued flying reptile you could imagine. You could almost sense that the artists were sick of painting this thing. So that is that. The flying animal series ends with a really spectacular reconstruction, Pterodactylus, with leopard, or maybe dare I say marsupilami, spots in its wings, is hunting delightfully awkwardly and shittily drawn Henri Rousseau-type butterflies on a bizarre seashore with badly drawn palm trees. By the way, palm trees did not exist when Pterodactylus was flapping about. They actually evolved in the late Cretaceous. So that's another interesting bit of information you can tell your friends in parties and shit. Anyways, there's just so much to unpack with this painting. The spotted marsupilami wings are almost certainly copied by these two paintings by Heinrich Harder. Harder Daddy was a German paleoartist who lived between the end of the 19th century and the interwar era of a German background, and he is known for a large number of really nice and sometimes bizarre works of paleoart. I mean, just look at these. Really wonderful stuff. One of his key works is the sprawling Diplodocus, reconstructed like a giant lizard, and you know, this is one of the greatest things about these old generation artists. Just by including a nicely rendered cloud, some beautifully colored hints of pine trees and sky and the seashore in the background, he makes this otherwise implausible and impractical reconstruction seem, well, really real. Who knows, maybe I'll do a entire episode on Heinrich Harder and review his paleo artworks in the near future. Would you like that? Let me know in the comments and we can at least get some algorithmic traction out of this shit. Anyways, going back to the wonderful Pterodactylus card, this painting also has a lucky strike. Notice that Pterodactylus is rocking this incredibly slick, spiky crest-like hairdo. Now, at the time, this was a complete speculation, but lo and behold, later on, one fossil of Pterodactylus was examined under UV light, and scientists saw that it had some sort of crest anchored to its head. Now, we don't know if all Pterodactylus specimens or species had this, and let me just tell you, the classification of Pterodactylus is quite a bit complicated. But anyways, at least some pterodactyls had crests which may have looked like this weirdo imagined hairy crest pictured on this card. So I think it's a nice win for this surreal card set, and it's also really nice to see a pterosaur with just spots in its wings. Sometimes I think artists overlook the possibilities offered by membranous wings. I mean, in the present day, you got some bat species with really fancy wing patterns, so we could sometimes illustrate pterosaurs with similar patterns too, I think. Anyways, that's that for the flying creatures. Let's move on. Oh, it's these guys again. Mammifers. Okay, so in all of these sets, there's a dedicated section for mammals. And if you're a kid interested in dinosaurs, you know, mammals they're alright, I guess, but they're also really boring. You want to see reptiles, you want to see dinosaurs, you want to see marine monsters, you want to see flying reptiles, but here, what do you got? Fucking horse. In fact, I remember as a kid disliking this card so much that I folded it in half and almost threw it away. But then my preservation instincts got the better of me, so I unfolded it and kept it. But yeah, you can still see the fold streaks along the middle. It's just an early horse. Interestingly, many of these sets feature Eohippus, but this one is Merychippus, a related species, and the artist really is not in his best form. In fact, the feet of the horse, you know, he wants to highlight that the early horse had 3 hooves, but with a lack of anatomical understanding, he makes the early horse look like it's walking on middle fingers. Middle finger, take a picture of that. Next up we have Megatherium, the classic giant ground sloth with a distinctly rat-like look. I mean, it takes a special artist to make a 6-meter long giant Xenarton look like a big rat. And I think a lot of the illusion comes not only from the wet rat hair-like texture of the hair on the animal, but also from its very small feet. You're used to seeing giant claws and foot claws on these animals, and in this picture they're all a bit obscured. Also the rat-like small ears and the, well, mouse-like long tail really don't help, and that is that. Next up, another Xenarton, of course, is Glyptodon. I actually like this card. It has the weird sulfur yellow background again, which is always a plus. And also its giant armored carapace just looks neat to behold. But yeah, look closer and the Glyptodon's face is a bit like a mischievous, devious bat. Almost like it doesn't belong there. Anyways, then we have the funniest card, not in the mammal section, but in all of this series. Mastodon, l'éléphant de l'Ohio. The Ohioan elephant. I mean, where should I begin to love this thing? You know, it's a dumpy little Humpty Dumpty shaped egg-like thing. It's smiling. It's a nice, kind fellow, you know, just wants to get along with you. It reminds me of the strange creature the villain was petting in that classic 1995 movie, The Fifth Element. And, you know, the movie also being French, I always wonder if they saw this card and tried to make a little blue version of this guy. But yeah, I mean, the crossed tusks, the little human ear-like ears, the benevolent angelic face, the unmistakable smile, the 3 dumpy feet, which make it look like the animal is actually tripedal. It's just a thing of beauty and wonder. And I might actually love the mammals section or start loving it just for this beautiful, funny and dumpy elephant. Straight out of Dumbo's LSD hallucinations. Speaking of hallucinations, the card set now does something really strange. It abandons cladistic classification for a contextual one. Instead of mammals, marine reptiles, or flying reptiles, or herbivorous dinosaurs, or predatory dinosaurs, which are, okay, you know, if you squint with one eye, you could interpret them as cladistic arrangements. But now we have this, animaux étranges, which just means strange animals. Put that in your fucking pipe and smoke it. Just strange animals, bro. What you gonna do about it? I mean, I think anything could be a strange animal, and then this card set could be like, I don't know, 2 million cards long. But yeah, at least in this context, strange animals just means prehistoric animals with strange things on their heads. And our first card is Wintatherium, which is a francophonic misspelling of Uintatherium. And we have a really surprisingly nice work of art here. I really suspect it was copied from something else, I just don't know what, and if you know, let me know. It's a hair and pus covered, almost mutant-like rendition of this thing with strange joystick-like protuberances on its head. Yeah, I'll just keep calling them joysticks, cause yeah, they don't look like anything else. That's right. They certainly don't look like anything sexual. Okay, let's keep this channel PG, okay? Anyways, that's that for Wintatherium. By the way, this animal is always typecast as this one-off weirdo total pus freak in all these vintage prehistoric cards or, well, vintage paleo books. but actually it was the member of a really distinct clade of mammals, and it's got some really bizarre cousins, which I'm showing you here. This animal group is really strange and interesting to study, and they were certainly not freaks, they were certainly adapted for something really specific. One final note, now that I'm recording while looking at the picture, something really ticks me off about this picture. I know I said it was well done and congruent in the beginning, but bear with me. Just look at its fucking ears. One of them is rendered like a rhino ear or a camel ear, and the other is completely different, as if it was like torn off and glued back on again. God damn, it's just so annoying, this lack of symmetry. I'm gonna hurl. Let's move on. Next we got Triceratops, which is the quintessential horned dinosaur. I think the card set makers just thought it was a strange animal, whereas I think it's one of the most recognizable and quote-unquote ordinary dinosaurs. This painting is really awful. It's like they started painting the animal's head, which was sort of okay. I mean, we're not talking about Renaissance standards of art here, but you know, it's passable. Then the artist realized he ran out of space horizontally and also was not going to be able to fit the animal in vertically. There would be a lot of empty space above and below. So he improvised really fast, and the legs look really comical. They look like, well, geometric abstractions, and the back of the animal really does this weird butt curve. It's almost like it's twerking, and the tail is like an afterthought. It's been tucked away between the rear legs, which once again are drawn as if there's no hip in between them. It's just a couple of flattened legs, which makes the whole picture look strangely two-dimensional. And to make up for the extra negative space above the creature, the artist also painted a bullshit last-minute palm tree. And I'm sorry, not even the colors can save this piece. So moving on, we have Parasaurolophus, almost certainly traced, if not stolen, from another earlier work of Paleoart. What makes this unique is the placement of the animal in a snowy landscape, which we saw once again in that really bad Jurassic World movie, where it is typecast as a winter dinosaur. Finally, in this section we have probably the best made image of the entire set. Another ceratopsian, ironically, after the unmitigated disaster that was Triceratops. This time we have Protoceratops, illustrated as a wary, proud and, well, beautiful frilled dinosaur. This painting was clearly inspired by some vintage works depicting Protoceratops, but once again the colors are beautiful. The green grass, the pinkish face of the animal, the yellow sky. All the skies are yellow in this universe. And then the overall composition is really pretty and beautiful too. This artist has good days and bad days, that's all I'll say. Okay, we have a special contextual set again. This time it's all about les plus grands animaux de tous les temps, which means the largest animals of all time. And this one sets off with a really bizarre card for Baluchitherium, which was a long-legged rhinoceros relative, which legitimately was one of the, if not the, largest land-living mammal of all time. Baluchitherium was renamed later into Indricotherium, and more recently it is known as Paraceratherium. There's a bunch of species like these once again, and they're all interesting in their own right. Go do a deep dive on their diversity on Wikipedia if you feel like it, because the path extending from, well, normal ancestral rhinoceri to this thing is quite complicated, convoluted, and fun to study. The artwork and reconstruction of these bygone giants has also its own share of strange hypotheses, including one reconstruction with elephant-like ears and a quasi-elephant-like trunk. Now, if you look at their skulls, you can see that Baluchitherium or Paraceratarium or whatever, they did have large nostrils, so something like a drooping fleshy snout or even a short tapir-like trunk is not impossible. But then there is this version, which is a bit more iffy, let's just say that much. But certainly it's a very extraordinary reconstruction of an already extraordinary creature. What makes this card so extraordinary though is neither of these. It's the very fact that the animal depicted here looks more like Mauropus, which belonged in the Calicotier group, which were also perissodactyls like rhinoceri, but they come from a completely different part of that family tree. I don't know why the artist chose this depiction or which sources he was inspired by, but yeah, this is what you get. Once again, it's a beautiful work of art if you just look at it in terms of, well, color, volume, and overall placement. I love the shimmering waters. I love those nameless black iris type plants in the foreground. They look like something from an alien planet, to be honest. I love the lush green background too, giving way into impressionistic yellow, green, and dark green stripes as you look towards the animal's head. It's a lovely card, but yeah, a big mistake. Well, next up we have another Le Plus Grand Animal, which is Diplodocus. This one is also, well, it is what it is. I mean, its head is really extraordinary. It looks more like the head of a turtle or even a strange snake, and the body is big and dumpy and saggy, and the artist has the hindquarters all muddled up again. One of the four limbs seems to be like a pillar of meat extending straight into the ground without any toes apparent. But yeah, this is Diplodocus for you, a peaceful swamp grazing herbivore. Then of course we have Brachiosaurus, which is a spelling error. It should be Brachiosaurus, but yeah, the card actually tells us that Brachiosaurus was le plus grand animal de tout le temps, which means the largest land animal of all time, at 100 tons heavy, 30 meters long and 12 meters high from the ground. Once again, this is a pretty predictable stock depiction of a large sauropod, but if you look at the legs and if you know something about, well, sauropod anatomy, you would know that the four limbs of these animals would not have any claws or toes. In fact, the four legs of these giant sauropods were always encased in this kind of mitten-like pad of flesh. They actually lacked fingers altogether and walked on their knuckle bones. Sometimes they had a thumb, and this at times bore a wicked claw. But yeah, like the pteranodon, always look closer at the skeletons of paleo creatures, which most people take for granted, and then you'll notice all sorts of bizarre and extraordinary details. And such is the case with sauropod hands. As for whether Brachiosaurus was the largest land animal of all time, I think we can confidently say that there probably were larger sauropods, but they are all a bit fragmentary, and names get floated around like Argentinosaurus or Bruhatcaiosaurus, which is famous for having the name Bra in it, and Supersaurus or Sauroposeidon. At one point when I was a kid in the late 1990s, there was something called Ultrasaurus, which was properly scientifically named as Ultrasauros, and for a long time this was like spoken among bands of children as like the largest dinosaur ever. It was 40 meters long, maybe 50. but then it turned out it wasn't as big. Then for a while there was the legend of Amphicoelias, which was known from one single vertebra of extraordinary size, which sadly disintegrated as it was being transported. Fortunately, there was a drawing of it made, so scientists were able to puzzle over for decades about what this was, and most recently, as of the mid-2020s, this animal was renamed as Maraapunisaurus and classified in the Rebachisauridae group or subgroup of sauropods. But yeah, check back every 2 or 3 years because these fossils are very fragmentary and what they are keeps changing all the time. And then we have my favorite card in this series, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now, in most children's paleo media, I always thought Tyrannosaurus was overdone and exaggerated. It was an exciting animal for sure, but it was the biggest, the best, and the paintings really didn't interest me that much, to be honest. But this card is an exception because there's something just off and weird about this Tyrannosaur. Its color is orange like a lobster or a crab. And to continue the crab allegory, its forelimbs are drawn like crab claws. And I know of no other depiction that does this. They look like the forelimbs of an insect, to be honest. And when I saw this card, even though I knew that this really wasn't how T-Rex probably looked, I started thinking about animals with forelimbs like insects and hind limbs like vertebrates, and an entirely new venue of speculation was open in my mind. And there's also something really weird about this T-Rex's face and eyes too. The lower jaw is paper thin and towards the end it just gets reduced to, well, teeth. And the brow ridge is unusually heavy, and once again, like Spinosaurus, there seems to be a forehead and the eyes have this unusually smart look about them. So this was T-Rex, le plus grand carnivore de tous les temps. Alright. Our final collection in this set is Les plus récents animaux préhistoriques, which means the most recent prehistoric animals, which is a boring batch, to be honest, just mammals, and who needs them when you have dinosaurs? But yeah, we have to be thorough, so here we go. Number 1, we have the mammoth, which is like a version of that mastodon we saw with a normal chromosome count, let's say. But even he looks a bit dumpy and blocky and cute. Yeah, and then we have the bison, which is actually quite well rendered compared to the rest of these cards. I think the artist knows his way around mammals, but he fumbled it with the reptiles. But once again, even with this bison, we can see that he cannot draw the hips of the creatures properly. They're all very narrow and too close together, like the hips of a perching bird. And yeah, the more you look at this bison, the more you realize something is off with it. It looks like a little ball with legs and horns, but yeah. Then we got the woolly rhinoceros, which is probably the best illustrated mammal in the set. There is some sort of foreshortening, which really helps. And it also looks like those beautiful cave paintings from southern France. And that's that. We finish off our set with this creature, Machairodus or Smilodon, but it just looks like a normal house cat with slightly pointier canines and a wide face. And to be honest, it looks like a Smilodon version of these dwarf stunted and chromosomally challenged cats, which you sometimes see on Instagram, getting all the likes and posting all the reels. It's a very silly creature, and one can't help but think, this is the saber-toothed tiger, the majestic and terrifying creature, and they made it look like a geriatric kitten, if there could be such a thing. But yeah, what you see is what you get, and this was the second set of bizarre French cards, which I had as a kid. and I reviewed for you. Now I'm gonna ask it out to all my followers. Did you as a kid have anything like this? Because as far as I know, there's no online documentation of this set anywhere else on the internet, so I guess this was a first. And if you like reviews of paleomedia and prehistoric paleomedia in general, I really recommend you go and visit the Love in the Time of Cosmosaurs weblog. It's an inexhaustible resource, and the people running it do a far better job at reviewing vintage paleoart than I can ever do. And if you listen this far, please comment so that we get some traction in the algorithm. Just let me know that you would like to flip cards. If you watched so far, say let's flip cards. Once again, if you watched so far, please comment let's flip cards, and let's freaking go, and we can tell apart the OG viewers from the quitters and the halfway crowd. So that's that, everyone. This was another CM Kozeman review of extraordinary vintage paleomedia. I hope you enjoyed it. By the way, if you notice, there's some names just scrolling past in the background. These names belong to everybody who's supporting me on patreon.com. And if you want to join their hallowed ranks and access a world of content that nobody else gets to see anywhere, please support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation at buymeacoffee.com. Every dollar makes a difference, and you get something out of it too. I'm going to properly scan and post these cards on my Patreon very soon, and well, you wouldn't want to miss out on that, would you? Anyways, that's that, everyone. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being here for me. I really like this channel. I really like being able to do things as they come to me, and I know what a privilege it can be. That is it, everybody. Goodbye, have a lovely day wherever you are, and always know I love you all.